Now that we are storing our information from NSUser defaults in our task objects array, it's time to set up our table view. So we're going to navigate to the ccViewController.h file, and we need to set up our table view object. So we're going to make our class conform to the UI TableViewDataSource and delegate protocols. Now we're not going to be using the delegate protocols yet. We're only going to be using the data source, but it's useful to do both at the same time so that when we need our delegate methods, we'll be able to access them and we won't have to do the setup process again. So we're going to add a comment and we're going to say UI TableView data source, and we're also going to conform to the delegate as well. So UI TableView delegate, and notice that I'm using commas in between these names for my protocol, and they're all inside of these angle braces. So now I need to navigate to ccViewController.m, and in the viewDidLoad method, I need to set the delegate property and the data source property of my table view to self. So let's say self.tableview.datasource is equal to self, right? Just in the same way that we've set up our to add task view controller's delegate property to self, we're setting up our table view's data source to self. Right, so the TableView protocol knows to send messages to me. So we're also going to say self.tableview.delegate is equal to self. And now we can implement two of the UI TableView data source methods. So let's scroll down to the bottom here and let's add a pragma mark since we're going to be adding some data source methods. So we're going to say UI TableView data source. And I can go ahead and add some methods here. So like before, we're going to be able to use this autocomplete for our method names. And the way we do this again is we press the subtraction sign. And since I know I'm going to be implementing a TableView data source method, I can start typing TableView. And we're going to search for the method name number of rows in section. So we can scroll down here and we see number of rows in section. So this is the method we need. We can press return. And I can go ahead and add my curly braces. And the other method we're going to need to implement is the number of sections in TableView. So we're going to be able to do number of sections in TableView. And I can add curly braces. And finally, we're going to want to implement cell for row at index path. So I can do TableView. And we're going to scroll up. And I'm going to find cell for row at index path. There it is, self row at index path. And I can go ahead and press return and add curly braces as well. So notice that all three of these methods have a return value. The first two have an NS integer and the third one has a UI table view cell. So let's set these up. We're going to return for the number of rows in section. Well, we want to make this dynamic based on the number of tasks we have. And we know that we're adding these tasks to an array called task objects. So let's return the count of the number of elements in my tasks array, task objects array. So we're going to say return, and we're going to say self.taskObjects, and we're going to call the method count on it to return the number of elements in my task objects array. For a number of sections in TableView, we're simply going to return 1 because we're only going to have tasks and we don't have multiple sections here. So we're going to start off by writing static, which is a keyword. It's going to allow us to only set the identifier here that we're going to set, the variable cell identifier, will always be cell. And why are we doing this? Well, we only have one prototype cell in our storyboard's table view, and we set that prototype cell's identifier equal to cell. So we always want to use cell here, this string. And now we can go ahead and create a UI table view cell, and we can give it a variable named cell. We're going to say table view DQ reusable cell with identifier for index path. And we're going to use our cell identifier, and we're going to do our index path that we get handed from our parameter here for this method. So we can say index path and add a semicolon. And what this is going to do is it's going to attempt to reuse the cell object, and it's just going to update the view in order to save memory when the method cell for row at index path is called. So if it's already created a cell of this type, it's not going to create a new one, and we're only going to be creating one type of cell, so it's going to keep reusing this UI table view cell object over and over. So next we're going to go ahead and we can, if you're taking a look at some of the old examples, maybe you have a comment here like configure cell, and we can create our CC task object, and we're going to say task is equal to self.taskObjects. And then we can say object at index path dot row, or we can refactor this to use our literal syntax, and we can simply write it like this as well. So now we have our access to our task object. We know that task object has a bunch of properties that we can set up as the ways to display our cell. So we're going to say cell.textLabel.text is equal to task.title. So we're using our property of our task object, and we're setting that equal to the text label property of our cell, and labels have a property text. And we can set up our detail text label next, but let's use our date for that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to figure out how to convert an NSDate object into a string. Well, we can use this awesome little class here, and we can say NSDate formatter, and we're going to say formatter is going to be the variable name, and we're going to go ahead and allocate and initialize an NSDate formatter object. So now we need to set up some parameters for our formatter. So we're going to be able to say left bracket formatter, and we're going to say set date, and we're going to be able to use a format here. So we're going to say set date format. And you could also use a style if you want, but this will work just as well. And we can do at quote, and we're going to say YYY MMDD. We can go ahead and close it out. So this will set year, month, and date from our date, and it'll convert it to an NS string. So let's do that. We're going to do NS string, and we're going to say string from date is equal to formatter string from date, and we'll pass in our date. So we're going to say task.date. Right, so we're using our formatter, and we're saying string from date now that we've set up its date format, and we pass in the argument our task.date, and we get a return string here, string from date. So now we can update our cell's detail text label to the string from date. And finally, what we need to do is we need to return a UI table view cell object from this method, so we can say return cell. So great, now we've set up all of our data source methods for the UI table view, and we can go ahead and run our application. So again, make sure you have iPhone Retina 4-inch screen selected. Let's go ahead and run our application. And we see task 1 and task 2, they both have the dates. So let's try adding another task. So you can press task, and let's set it back. So let's set it to Sunday the 29th. This was an old task, and we're going to say task 4 or 3, and we can say description here, and we can press add task, and now we see that it has the date properly and it's added task to read to our table view.